Hi everyone. So in this lecture, we wanted to take a look a bit at the arrays and just kind of how they are manipulated and what we are passing with them. So again, we saw a bit earlier in our lectures that we can print out array objects and the kind of the memories that are there. Uh, an important thing is that when you pass around arrays as parameters, such as right here, this double array that's called output, what is actually passed isn't the object itself, but a reference to where it is stored. And what that means is that we can't actually change that reference, but the individual values that are within this array can be changed. And now we'll actually see this laid out programmatically here. So if we run this piece of code called passingArrays.java in your weak tree example, what you'll get right away is just an output of the square roots from 0 up to 4. And actually, to make this a bit more interesting, let's start at the square root of 4. Let's see. Let's just try to get whole numbers here. Okay, so let's get the square root of 16. Okay, then let's go ahead, see if we can increase these numbers a bit. I think it's 36. Cool. I believe it's that one. Oh, try to do this real quick. Cool. I forgot my square roots for a bit there. Perfect. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this one out for us, and then you'll see we get our whole numbers here, and nothing too interesting happens. What happens essentially is that we get an array, and we declare it to have the values of the square root that we're working with. Now, we actually pass this array called square roots into a function called print array down here, and you'll see that it takes it an output. What's it's passed is a reference to the output variable. So this isn't actually this one. It is a reference to the memory and storage. And it's important to kind of make that distinction in the notes here. If you look at the Python tutor, we are using Java, but Python tutor is helpful to go ahead, and you can see here we actually have this it goes ahead and it lays it out programmatically for us, but that's useful to try and run some codes. And I would say go ahead and make a function that passes in an array and then see what happens there. And essentially what I want to show off is if we uncomment the trash array of square roots, what will happen is it will actually go ahead, we try to print it, and it will take in this array over here into its referencing, and it will say destroyed. And what it does is it says for each item in this array that I took in, which is the square roots one, change every element into 9,999 or 99,999. And we'll see here that we pretty much trash the array from the neat square roots over to this values up here. Now, a thing that we kind of want to look at though is, okay, well, sometimes you might be working in a program or you're making some type of program that goes ahead and it changes a single element of an array. And what you would want to do is maybe say something like this. Okay, I'm going to take in the public static void trash element method, double of the output element. And you could say right here, trash element right here, this one. Let me comment out that one. What it does is it takes in the square roots array, it sets it to 2, and what happens now is it goes ahead and for each element in that array, it goes ahead and it changes the, it goes ahead and it takes in this element of 2, which in our scenario 0, 1, 2, which will be the 6. And what happens is the trash element function runs, takes in the 6, and then it wants to change it to 999. So if I run this code, we should be changing the second element, and unfortunately, it seems like we're not actually changing the element there. So what happens here is that because we don't have a reference to the array that we're working with, all this method knows is that this is some type of element that is value taken in, but it has no way to know that it's a part of that array. So you could see here, even though we say square roots of 2 up here, square roots is never referenced down here, and thus it can't be changed. And you'll see here, I can actually print out the output element like so. But unfortunately, nothing else happens in my code. So what we would like to do is try to actually make this trash element work on an individual element. And what you would need to most likely do, there's a few different ways that you can do it. But what you could do is probably take in an array itself instead of doing the trash element. And what we could do is say, let's take in a double of output. And then we could say an int of index like so. And what we can do now is say for int of I is equal to 0, I is less than output dot length, I plus plus, what we want to say is, hey, when I get to this index value, change it to the element that needs to be destroyed. And what I could say is if I is equal to index, so if I am currently on the proper index that I would like to change in my for loop, what I could say is grab my output of I and then set it equal to 999. Now, what will happen here, let's try to see if this will make any changes for us here. Oops, and I need to add it in for us. Let's do square roots and then an index of 2 that we're working with. And you'll see here, even though I didn't actually return anything from my trash element, and I didn't make any return values or modifications, it is able to access the reference of this array, which is here, dig into the index that it's at, and then change the value. And you'll see here, unlike the previous scenario, it actually changes it when it pops up down here. So that is just a little snippet of what arrays are like in Java and how we can pass them in parameters and so forth as well. And very similar to arrays as well, we can look at I believe this one called passing strings. Very similar to the array, same type of method here. Let's go ahead and try to run this guy. We could say that we have the before. This is a test. And we could print out our string. Let me go ahead and try to print, whoops, a daisy. Is the array there? It's the wrong one. If we modify our strings, we can see here that when I print out the string, after the modify string method down here, we replace each element in the car at the I during this index with the Z. So we can go ahead and replace in modify string. And then after this, you'll notice, though, that we have the same type of idea where it doesn't actually modify the array for us. So again, very similar to arrays. Sometimes they will, or excuse me, we are passing a reference to the strings, and just like the array doesn't have an idea in our previous trash element method, where we didn't have access to the array and couldn't change it, similar to here, this type of string is going ahead, and because we're making this type of string in this method, it doesn't replace it up here. So you'll notice that even though we modified the string here, it doesn't replace it fully. But if we go ahead and take a look at this character array, so I'm going to go ahead and comment out the string. Now you'll notice here we're using char, C-H-A-R, instead of the character with the capital C. Usually when you're making the array of these, you want to make a char array like this, but in other scenarios where you're not using it, you're just making an individual character, then you can use the capital C to get those methods. And what I want to say here, so let's go ahead, try to see if we can run this version instead. We'll see here that in the before method, we have the A, B, and C. We print it out and we get each element there. We modify the array inside of this method here. You'll see here that we have access to that destroyed array, and that's what's important. We have access to the reference address. And after we change each element in this array to Z, we print it back out. And now we'll see that even though we printed it out back here, it is now changed. So again, it's important to note the difference of functionality between these. A string that is changed inside of a method, if it's not returning anything for us, then it's not going to stay returned. And you might be wondering, well, how do I actually fix that issue? Well, what we could do is return. Let me go ahead and recomment all these, and let me uncomment those. Sorry for the nose. I have a few nephews over. Let me see if I can do it this way. So we modify our string. And now if I hit play again, what should happen is that the this is the test is still there. So what I would like to do is essentially, instead of having this be void, what I could say is that this will become a string. And then I'm going to return the modified string that is there because this doesn't have reference to the previous one. And what I could say is our string is equal to modify string of our string. And now if I hit play, we'll see that I get a returned new string. So again, these are a little tricky to kind of wrap your head around, but this is just functionality to try to remember. If anything different is happening in your code, maybe try to take a look at these. But again, sometimes the behavior won't be just as you think it might in these parameters. So always check your parameters and try to fiddle around with how you might be able to mess around or change the code a bit to make sure it does what you want it to do.